Sunday, Monday, happy days. Tuesday, Wednesday, happy days. Thursday, Friday, happy days. The weekend comes, my cycle hums, ready to race to you.
Hi everyone, my name is Randy Kindig and this is show number 4 of the Floppy Days podcast, the podcast that covers vintage computing. Today's show is about the Apple I computer. First, I wanted to cover a little bit of news. In a couple of weeks, I will be traveling on vacation to Wyoming and Montana. For those of you that don't know, I currently live in Indiana, near Indianapolis. About 10 years ago, we lived in Montana for a little while, and there's a wonderful computer history museum there in Bozeman, Montana, called the American Computer Museum. I have contacted the director of the museum and hope to have an interview for the next episode of Floppy Days. So he's supposed to confirm within the next couple of days, and hopefully I'll have that for you. For some other news, some real exciting news here. I'm working with a couple of other people on bringing you another vintage computer podcast. This one will be about the Atari 8-bit computer. We were looking around, we felt like that there are some podcasts out there about the Apple II, the Macintosh, and Earl Evans is starting up a Commodore podcast. The Atari 8-bit line is a great one, and the Atari 800 was my first real computer. So I contacted a couple of other people who were also thinking along the same lines, and we decided that we'd put together a podcast about the Atari 8-bit. I'm very excited about this, and more details are to come. This segment of the show, I would typically cover my personal memories and stories of today's topic, which of course is the Apple I computer. However, we're still pretty early in the timeline, the computer timeline that I'm covering. I was not really into computers when the Apple I came out. I don't have any personal memories. I never had any really personal experience with the Apple I. So I don't have a lot to cover there. However, I do have some audio clips that I wanted to play. One of which is, the first of which is Steve Wozniak talking about the Apple I. And once that's completed, I have another clip from Leo Laporte that highlighted the Apple I.
Basically, our computer was all on one PC board. Just had to stuff all the parts in and put it over a wave soldering machine, and it was completely done. And the user only had to connect 3 things: a keyboard, a monitor, and some transformers for power. It turns out we found out that it only cost $13 to pay a company to stuff all the parts in and wave solder it. It only cost $13. We were wondering, why are all these kits being sold? Why would you not pay the $13 and make sure everybody gets a completely assembled computer? The people that were starting this little business had no idea. They came out of the hobbyist world of heap kits, and they thought that somehow that was a big cost savings benefit. It was really a drawback. So we were going to sell the most assembled computer of its day. It did not have a case on it even. It was just a plain old PC board. I mean, it came from, my thinking and the rest of the Homebrew Computer Club thinking was pretty much along the lines of, if you had a whole bunch of wires strapped across your living room floor, running into your TV set and clipping into your phone with alligator clips all over, and it was gonna burn down your house someday, that was fine, because it was usable. That was a computer, and you could really use it. And it didn't matter at all that it had to be, you'd have some sort of looks or some sort of product value. And that was where I came from, and Steve came more from a thinking of trying to get to a product that could be sold en masse and be a part of a big market that was about to happen as a real product that you can deliver and other people can use besides just we few freaks who couldn't afford it. Anyway, with our Apple I computer, a whole bunch of all the computers coming out, it was the most assembled one. It was also the greatest value per dollar. To buy the computer that everyone wanted really had video in it, and we had it built into the Apple I. There was only, preceding the Apple I, there had only been one other low-cost computer introduced by a company called Sphere that had video built in. It was sort of acknowledging the computer for the home has a video terminal. It talks to a TV set. So we were on one of the leading edges there. We also had 4K of RAM memory, 8K of RAM memory on our board. I had designed it for the state-of-the-art RAMs of the day. The smallest chips, the 16-pin ones, were the ones I chose. Why? In my computer education, a computer value was measured by, or how good a job you did was measured by how small a board area it took, meaning how few of components. But if you used a smaller chip than another size chip, you could use more of them. It was square inches was what I counted as important. And so anyway, I used the right RAM chips. All the other computers coming out were not being designed by professional engineers for their companies. They were not well-managed projects. They were using the simplest to design parts you could buy, the 2102 static RAM. But the problem was the 2102 static RAM was only 1K. And the new dynamic RAMs, which were harder to design for, were 4K. But the hobbyist mentality is slow to move towards the state-of-the-art parts and the design, the sophistication that's involved. So we were the only computer that was introduced with those dynamic RAMs for maybe a year and a half after we started using them, or even maybe 2 years. After the Apple I, we started shipping it and we got known. All the magazines were starting to follow this. Something's happening in microcomputers. There's all these kids coming out, and electronics magazines love to print an interesting article comparing them all. Well, the Apple always looked pretty good for amount of memory, features, speed, video built in, you know, the power supply was built in. I mean, it just always came out very good, and that was a good motivator, getting positive feedback like that. And it got us known, even though we only sold a couple of hundred of them in a year. It got our name known, and we had a good respect for our image of ourselves nationally was good.
Okay, that was Steve Wozniak talking about the early days of Apple Computer when he developed the Apple I. Next is a about 7-minute clip from Leo Laporte and Salam Ismail talking about the Apple I.
Screensavers, our first guest tonight operates vintage.org. It's an online warehouse of old, rare technology that can't be forgotten. We're so glad he's preserving it. And, of course, they have regular fairs where people can see these in action. Today, he's brought something that is very important to all of us who use personal computers, the original Apple I computer. Welcome, Salam Ismail. I always get that wrong, Salam. Thank you for being here. It's great to have you back.
Thanks.
Last time we had so many things. I'm glad we could focus on one. This is so important. It's not the first personal computer. That's the MITS Altair.
Correct. Well, you can debate that, too.
This was 77?
76.
76.
Mm-hmm.
Woz was a member of the Homebrew Computer Club. By day, worked at HP, and they had this great deal where you could get parts from HP and build anything you want, and HP could either buy it or you could take it home with you, right?
Well, yeah, actually, Woz had to approach HP.
They had the right of first refusal.
Exactly, and they said, no, there's no future in personal computers.
No market for those things.
Not at all.
And thank goodness, because he built this. Now, then he sold it to members of the Homebrew Computer Club as a kit, right?
Well, actually, originally, Woz was just giving out plans.
Say, build it yourself.
Exactly. But if it wasn't for the vision of Jobs, who said, hey, this is something here that, you know, this is really something here, because there were certain features about this, including, you know, the fact that it was all in one and had the terminal, the display logic built onto the motherboard, and so it was Jobs' marketing vision that really, you know, was the push behind this. Actually,
how early? This is a kit. What's the genesis of this one?
Basically, I'm still doing research on it. I'm still trying to figure it out, but I believe that this might have been one of the first 50 that was sold from the Byte Shop. The Byte Shop was a computer store.
They were the first computer store.
Exactly, and
I
so
remember them very
I
well.
believe that they were, you know, the ones that made the first 50 board order that really.
So this was built by Apple.
Yeah, all the boards were manufactured by Apple.
And they had a wooden case?
Well, the case is actually aftermarket. It was made, the theory I'm going off of was that it was either the Byte Shop or whoever actually sold it.
Put it in.
Put the case together for, you know, as on order, basically.
It's a custom thing.
It's a custom case, because the only thing Apple sold was the motherboard and, of course, the cassette interface, which allowed you to save programs.
How much RAM did this thing have?
This is actually in an 8K configuration. You can get it in a 4K or 8K configuration. So here's all the memory right here.
That's what these little chips are, is memory chips.
So it's fully populated, so it's an 8K machine.
You can't add any either. There's no slots.
Well, you could hack memory onto it. Actually, there's a user port in the back, an expansion port.
Okay, we won't turn it around. I don't want to handle this too much. This is the processor here, a
6502 microprocessor.
6502, which was kind of a low-power There's an interesting choice. Let's put it that way.
It wasn't actually low power. I mean, there's still debates to this day about the 6502 versus the Z80 and things of that sort. But it was actually, some people consider it the first RISC processor. So it actually did have a.
It was simple.
Yeah.
And then this is the parallel port controller. Is that what that is?
That's exactly what that is. Yep.
Look how big that has to be. This is the your partner Hans was showing me. This is kind of the most interesting thing in here. What are these chips?
Those are shift registers, and that's actually how the video display is that's how the video is output to the video display.
That made it really unique that they had it built in like that.
That they had the video circuitry on the board, correct, included, as opposed to having to have an add-on.
Now, it looks like some of this was either hacked after the fact, or do you think the Byte Shop did this?
No, this was probably the original owner did this. It's taking up some signal and bringing it out to the back to this port marked synchronization or sync.
So is that video out here?
I'm not sure, actually. I think it was just to maybe sync it up with some external thing that he was messing with.
Well, that's who bought these, though, was hackers.
Exactly.
I mean, if you bought this thing, you were buying a contract to mess around with it.
Well, actually, I mean, for what it is, it's actually in very original shape. This area up here was intended to be a user area where you added your own components.
They left it vacant with punch holes so that you could actually wire something in. This is obviously the power supply. It looks like an old doorbell power supply. It's pretty primitive. Look at the big capacitors on here. What's that for?
Well, that basically just filters the power that's coming in from the power supply to smooth it out so that it doesn't like overload the chips or anything like that when you turn it on.
Just amazing. What is this add-on card here?
This is the one and only option that Apple made. It's the cassette interface. So this allowed you to connect a cassette recorder to it so you can save and load programs.
No disk drives, obviously. The cassette was the only storage, no hard drive.
At this point, disk drives were still kind of very expensive, very new, but it was right on the cusp of when disk drives started to become available for personal computers.
How did you come by this thing?
This actually is a computer that's currently for sale. It was
you put it on eBay.
No. I put it on for sale on the Vintage Computer Festival.
Oh, you did? Oh,
we have our own
your own
auctions.
site. Okay.
And so this was a seller. The current owner is basically the second owner. He bought it from the original owner at an Apple user group meeting in Santa Clara in 1981. Played with it a little bit. Took it to Apple at one point to see if it could have disk drives added to it.
Right. They must have loved seeing this come in the door.
It was interesting, and they said, well, it would be feasible, but it would require some work. So he took it home at that point, put it away, and this is the first time it's come out since then.
Your reserve on this was high. The highest bid you got was $12,000.
Highest bid was $12,000, and the reserve is $16,000. So it didn't sell. So as of now, it's still for sale.
But the amount of history. How many do you think are there of this in this quality?
Okay, there was 200 ever made.
Total. This is not the Apple II, folks. This is the Apple I.
Exactly.
The Apple II was the one that kind of exploded.
That's the one that really launched the whole personal computer revolution. But there was 200 of these made. Of the 200, I'm estimating that probably less than 50 exist. And I have a personal catalog that I keep for my own research purposes. But what happened is, according to the people at Apple, and I've talked to Woz and Mike Scott, who was the original president, they had a deal where you can exchange 2 Apple I's for the new Apple II. And so
a lot of them came back in.
A lot of them came back.
Were they destroyed? What happened?
All but one were destroyed.
Oh.
And so that's why there's probably less than 50 of these.
That's what makes this so very rare. Yeah. We got these are copies of the.
Well, these are reproductions. This is the user manual, and you can.
With the original Apple logo, it's kind of fun to see that.
And actually, what's interesting is on the outside here, it has a really neat expression: "A mind forever voyaging through strange seas of thought alone."
And that's Sir Isaac Newton.
That's kind of things.
What a wonderful bit of history. People can learn more about it on your website. And what is the URL for that? Tell me again.
Vintage.org.
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 Easy to find.
And we have the next Vintage Computer Festival.
When's that coming up?
In Munich on May 3rd and 4th.
Oh, fun.
It's the European version of the Vintage Computer Festival.
All right. And of course, go to thescreensavers.com. We've got all that information and a lot more. Thank you for bringing this here, Slam. It's so great to see it. What a bit of history. This is really what started it all, I have to say. All right. Thank you very much. Good to see you again.
Okay, that's the end of the audio clips. The next thing I wanted to cover was the history of the Apple I computer. In 1975, Steve Wozniak began attending homebrew computer club meetings, which he heard about from a friend. At that time, Woz hadn't even heard of the Altair computer, but had heard that the club was for people interested in computer terminals. Woz couldn't afford an Altair, but he watched as others brought theirs to the meetings, and he was pretty fascinated by that. He felt like he could probably improve on the basic design if he had a low-cost CPU. So he attended an electronics show in San Francisco where MOS Technology, that's MOS Technology, had advertised that they were selling its new 6502 processor for only $20. Woz attended the show, handed over his $20, and went to work. The first thing he did was design a BASIC for the 6502 in just a few weeks. Once he had done that and impressed the Homebrew Club members, he set out to design a computer to run the language. So he had the language, he needed something to run it on. He designed a board with the 6502 processor and interfaces to a keyboard and video monitor, which is very impressive considering the design of the 6502. It was finished in only a few weeks. Woz took his computer to homebrew meetings and passed out copies of his design, which was pretty easy for anyone to understand. He believed in sharing. He called his machine an Apple, which came from Steve Jobs. The machine design was simply a board. It didn't have a case, didn't have a keyboard, didn't have a power supply, and required a lot of work to assemble it by hand. Steve Jobs saw an opportunity and convinced Woz to start a company with him, but Woz intended to keep his current job at Hewlett-Packard, which he loved. They founded the company on April 1st, 1976, along with Ron Wayne. Jobs figured they would be able to sell the boards at the homebrew meetings, but wasn't content to merely sell to hobbyists. He also began stirring up interest in the retail arena for the Apple. In July 1976, Woz gave a demonstration of the Apple I to a homebrew meeting crowd, which included Paul Terrell. Paul was one of the industry's earliest retailers. The next day, a barefoot Steve Jobs showed up at the bike shop owned by Paul Terrell and convinced Paul to order 50 fully assembled Apple I computers, which had to be completed in 30 days. The two Steves had no parts and no money, so they took a 30-day loan and started work. They had to hire some help to get the work done, but they got the job done and delivered it on the 29th day. All of the 200 or so Apple I computers eventually built were sold either through some computer stores in the Bay Area or by a parcel service out of Jobs' home office. The Apple I went on sale in July 1976 at a price of $666.66 because Wozniak liked repeating digits and because they originally sold it to a local shop for $500 plus a 1/3 markup. Here's a short audio clip where Woz talked about this.
Then we came up with Steve worked the deal to sell his computers the wholesale price to the store for $500. What should the retail be? Add a third on. That puts it about $667. Woz at $666.66 because it's all one digit. To me, that was just an easier way to type it. We didn't know what the number had religious significance. We found out.
Competition. Competing machines such as the Altair 8800 generally were programmed with front-mounted toggle switches and used indicator lights, red LEDs most commonly, for output, and had to be extended with separate hardware to allow connection to a computer terminal or a teletypewriter machine. For the Apple I, all one needed was a keyboard and an inexpensive television set. This made the Apple I an innovative machine for its day. End of the line. In April 1977, the price was dropped to $500 to $475 with 4K of RAM. It continued to be sold through August 1977, despite the introduction of the Apple II in April 1977, which began shipping in June of that year. Apple dropped the Apple I from its price list by October 1977, officially discontinuing it. As Wozniak was the only person who could answer most customer support questions about the computer, the company offered Apple I owners discounts and trade-ins for Apple IIs to persuade them to return their computers, contributing to their scarcity. Approximately 40 to 50 Apple I computers are documented to exist, plus an indefinite number of possible unreported cases, making it a very rare collector's item. The Apple I registry managed by Mike Willigel shows 46 units positively identified to date. On June 15, 2012, a working Apple I was sold at auction by Sotheby's for a record $374,500, more than double the expected price. On November 24, 2012, at auction Team Brecker in Cologne, Germany, it set a world record price for a fully working Apple I of $640,000 US. There was an even more recent auction that bested that record, and the story behind that is, I thought, a little fascinating, so I thought I'd just briefly cover that here. Electrical engineer Fred Hatfield bought an Apple I in 1976 at an auction in Germany on May 25th, 2013. This was just a couple weeks ago as of this podcast. It sold for $671,400. Fred was one of the first ones to purchase an Apple I, but he didn't like it. He didn't like it at all. It was capable of doing some calculations and so on, but it was kind of short on necessary things that you needed to actually use it well, he was quoted as saying. I called Steve Jobs and discussed his machine with him and complained to him about it. We had a long discussion. It was an interesting conversation, Hatfield says. I didn't get anywhere. Jobs then personally wrote Hatfield and offered up a solution. He would send Hatfield a new Apple II if he sent the Apple I back with $400. Hatfield declined. I kept the Apple I. I continued to use it to decode radio signals, he said. Eventually, he quit using the Apple I and it ended up in a box. Over time, other Apple I's began to appear at auctions. Hatfield says he registered on the Apple I registry site 2 or 3 years ago. He posted a photo of his old Apple I with the letter Steve Jobs had sent him. A buyer contacted him soon thereafter. Hatfield sold the Apple I with the letter for $40,000. Sounded like a good deal to me, Hatfield says. I figured that was a pretty reasonable offer. Hatfield also said he has no regrets, even after the computer sold for several times what he was paid for it. Okay, now I wanted to cover some of the technical specs of the Apple I. It was a fully assembled circuit board containing about 60 chips. The CPU was an MOS 6502 at 1.023 megahertz. The memory options were 4K of RAM, 8K of RAM, and it was expandable to 65K. As far as ports go, it had a keyboard port, a video port, which was capable of 24 lines of 40 characters, monochrome, and composite video, and graphics of 280 by 192. As far as slots, it had one vertical expansion slot. For operating systems, there was built-in language firmware in ROM, which is basically a hex editor. Later, you could get a basic cassette for it for $5, and there was an extended monitor for approximately $5. As far as peripherals go, an optional board was available that provided a cassette interface for storage, and that was released at the cost of $75. Users still had to add a case, power supply, transformers, power switch, ASCII keyboard, and composite video display. Next, I wanted to cover popular books, magazines, and software of the day and today. One good book, of course, is I Was, which is Wozniak's personal story. I have his book. I think it's pretty popular. I've seen it out there a lot, and I would definitely recommend it. It's a good way to find out what was happening in the early days of Apple Computer. Another good book that I've mentioned in previous podcasts is Fire in the Valley, The History of the Personal Computer. And it is an excellent resource, which I tend to use for all of my podcasts, as it has a lot of the historical information concerning the early days of computing. A third book, which again I tend to use a lot for my podcast, is Stan Veit's History of the Personal Computer. There's a section in there talking specifically about the Apple I and Stan Veit's interactions with Steve Jobs, which is pretty interesting, and his history as far as selling the Apple I computer in his store. Another good book that I found that is available today is called The Apple I Replica Creation, Back to the Garage by Tom Owad and Steve Wozniak. This looks like a good book for computer hobbyists. It talks about Apple I replica creation. According to the information on Amazon, Back to the Garage is sure to equally appeal to kids with gift certificates looking for fun on a snowy January day, as well as to adults eager to learn the basics of simple microcomputer design. The book begins by teaching readers the basics of computer processing by discussing the functionality of the 9 chips on the Apple I motherboard. From there, readers will be taught the basics of memory access and video input and output. Readers then learn how to assemble the various hardware components into a fully functioning Apple I replica. Finally, readers will learn how to write their own applications to make run on their old or new computer. Now, I don't have this particular book, but the description sounds fascinating, and I probably will spend the money to buy this. Next, I wanted to cover modern upgrades. So we know what was available for the Apple I in the day, and it wasn't around for a very long period of time, nor was it particularly popular. But there are some modern upgrades available, or replicas. For instance, there's a software-compatible clone of the Apple I called the Replica One. It's produced using modern components, was released in 2003 at a price of around $199 assembled or $149 in kit form. The Replica One is a clone of the Apple I designed by Vince Briel with permission from Steve Wozniak. The Replica One is functionally a close copy of the original, but it's designed using much more modern parts on a smaller, simplified board design. The Replica One is designed around the same MOS 6502 chip used as the core of the Apple I. Like the original, the Replica One utilizes simple AV in-out to connect to a television or other similar screen, and it maintains most of the original's functionality, such as the lack of a delete key. There are also other replicas and do-yourself kits and instructions available. Another example is the Mimeo One by Mike Willogal, who I mentioned earlier maintains the Apple I registry. Many of you, or at least those of you that are Apple fans, have heard of the CFFA 3000, which is a compact flash interface for the Apple II computer by Rich Dreyer, and I hope I didn't bungle your name, Rich. But there also is a version of that same card called the CFFA1 that is built for the Apple I computer and its replicas and clones. And it's produced by the same gentleman. And if you have one of the replicas and clones, sounds like that would be a really terrific addition. Next, I wanted to cover emulation. As I did some searching on the internet, I only found a couple of Apple I emulators. Now, there might be other ones out there, but these appear to be a couple of the most popular ones. One of which is MES, the Multi-Emulator Super System. Those of you that know about MES know that it can emulate many different game consoles and computer systems. The Apple One is one of those. Another one is called Open Emulator, and this is available for the Apple Macintosh, Snow Leopard and Lion. I have downloaded and installed this and have played with it a little bit, and it seems like a pretty good emulator. Current websites. So what kind of websites are there available today to get more information about the Apple One? One of the sites that I found was Mike Wilgel's Apple One site. He's the one that maintains the Apple One registry. He's also got much more information, a huge amount of information about the Apple One on his site, which I will have a link to in the show notes. He has information on the Mimeo replica. He has sources for the Apple One software and lots of links to other Apple One sites. So you definitely want to check that site out if you're interested in more information about the Apple One. There's also a site called the Apple One Owners Club. It's at applefritter.com. It includes message boards, development tools, documentation, schematics, games, and member pages. It appears to be targeted towards those who own Apple One computers or their replicas or clones. There's also another site that I found is called Joe Torzewski's Apple One page. Joe was one of the original purchasers of the Apple One computer from Steve Wozniak. He has the original bill of sale and the money order receipt from his purchase, and you can see all of that information on his website. I've provided links to all of these sites that were mentioned in my show notes. One other site that I wanted to mention that you may want to review as well or visit as well is the Classic Computing blog by David Grealish. He has an interview with Lonnie Mims, and that is probably there's some. The blog really talks about the record-breaking prices that have been occurring at the auctions for the Apple One computers, and the fact that Lonnie Mims owns a couple of Apple Ones, and so it's an interesting interview to read. Well, that's about all I really had about the Apple One computer. I apologize. The show is actually a little short this month. It turns out that I just couldn't find that much information about the Apple One computer. It had such a short lifespan and had so few computers actually produced that I just couldn't find a ton of information. So I hope what I did find was helpful. And I'm going to go ahead and end the show today. Before I go, I did want to thank Paul Hagstrom, who wrote in via email and gave me some tips on what sort of information was available concerning the Apple One. Paul, I really appreciate your help. So please visit my website at floppydays.libsyn.com to get the show notes and the links to everything I've talked about today. Feel free to email me at floppydays@gmail.com, floppydays@gmail.com. I really appreciate any and all emails that I get. On Twitter, I am at floppydays. And if you would like to leave a personal voicemail, I would be happy to get those on future shows. You can call 206-426-7200 and let me know what you think, or any history or any thoughts, any personal memories of vintage computers. As I mentioned earlier, I hope to have a special podcast for my next podcast concerning the American Computer Museum in Bozeman, Montana. My next computer-based show will be about the Commodore PET. And I know there are a lot of Commodore users out there, and I think there are a lot of PET users, so I hope you guys find that interesting. Thank you very much for listening. Please pull out that old computer and compute like it was yesterday. Thank you.